Good afternoon. I hope you're all having a good weekend. I wanted to sort of wrap up on some of the things that have been happening this week, as well as giving you some insight into what is likely to happen in the forthcoming budget. This is where the government sets out its spending and budget plans for the year. This week we saw further proof and, well, maybe not exactly proof, but further indications that interest rates are going to rise very soon, and this is because of inflation. Inflation is hitting the Western world's economy like with a vengeance. Really, we haven't seen inflation like this probably since the 80s and 90s. So this is a serious problem. So interest rates are likely to go up by just under 0.25% in the UK, probably in the November Bank of England meeting. So we know that's going to happen. That will affect people who owe money and on mortgages, but it might help people who are saving money. Now, none of the other world economies have announced similar plans like this. So some feel that the UK is jumping the gun, but the UK has got to look after its own economy in a post-Brexit world where we've got to look after ourselves here. In Europe, of course, if you're in the euro, if you're a European Union country that is part of the euro, they cannot raise their own interest rate. They haven't got control over interest rates and their currency. The UK had opted out of that, so we've always had control of that when it comes to controlling things like inflation and or trying to reinflate the economy with more stimulus packages. So Rishi Sunak will set out these plans on Wednesday the 27th of October. And this is the second budget of the year. He did one in March, and the BBC have predicted 6 changes that could affect your pocket. Now, obviously, this only affects the UK, but the UK is the 7th largest economy in the world, and I think the problems we're having here are similar to problems in other countries such as America. But he's already announced a £7 billion spree on things like northern transport links, levelling up as they call it, and further childcare provision to help families with young children. I think this has been neglected over the last few years, certainly since the Cameron government, when they had to cut back on spending after the Labour government left the country bankrupt. And childcare has been neglected. I was at a meeting where I heard at the Hungarian embassy a couple of weeks ago, and I heard the young ambassador speaking, and he said that in Hungary, they value families. They're trying to encourage families. They're trying to encourage more mothers to stay at home and look after their children by giving tax incentives and tax breaks to families, and actually giving more tax breaks for the more children that you have. They've realised that demographically they need to repopulate the economy. The birth rates have been falling in the Western world in general, and this is causing a demographic problem. It's causing a pensions time bomb, in fact, because there will be more people retired than working. Well, not quite more people, but certainly a lower ratio of people working to retirees. So that will cause a problem, because there'll be less people paying tax to fund the pension of the people that have retired. And these are the state pensions, not company pensions. And this is important because the government haven't saved any of this money that they've been collecting from you all these years. And even if they had saved the money that people paid in their tax and national insurance, it wouldn't amount to a can of beans when it comes to paying out a pension, years ahead, which you're paying out more money in those times than you've collected when they started working. So if you calculate all the tax you paid all your life, and then you retire on a pension and you live for 10 or 15 years, you probably spent that already. And in any case, your taxes also paid for your healthcare, for your children's education, for the roads and the security, the police, the hospitals. All these things have been spent on using your taxes. So to say, well, I've paid my taxes, now I'm entitled to all of my money back with interest on my pension, is a bit of nonsense, really. So this will be further aggravated by the falling birth rate, and this is what Hungary is trying to sort out themselves by encouraging people to have more children. Of course, you saw in China they had the one-child policy a few years ago, and they taxed people more if they had more children. Hungary is kind of doing the opposite. Hungary are very much going their own way compared to many European countries, and they've fallen foul of the EU, as have Poland as well. Poland's in a massive row with the EU over their constitution and their dispute with their own laws and the laws of the European Union. And Ursula von der Leyen has come out and said, you must stand up. We can't change anything. You must obey the rules. Otherwise, we're going to withhold billions of euros that would have been given to Poland to spend on their infrastructure. I mean, this is like a direct threat to Poland. And Poland, I like the fact that Poland are at least standing up to the European Union, as of Hungary in cases. I like their fiery attitude and the attitude that they should be running their country the way they see fit, not the way bureaucrats in Brussels want them to run their affairs. But I won't go into that politics anymore. So Rishi's planning these big spending sprees, but that's nothing compared to what Joe Biden is planning. He's planning to spend $3.5 trillion on, I don't know, infrastructure. I know the infrastructure and the roads are probably crumbling a little bit in America, but this comes at a time when they've already printed more money than it's ever been printed in history, and how are they going to pay that back? In fact, they're increasing the budget in order to meet interest payments on these treasury bills, these bonds, T-bills as they're sometimes called. They're basically bonds. In the UK, we used to call them gilts. It's a loan to the government of your money in return for an interest payment, and you get your money back in a year, 10 years or whatever, 30 years. And when the money's been deflated so much, it's probably not worth the paper it's written on. But these bonds are used by big institutional investors because they do give guaranteed returns. And the US has never defaulted on these interest payments. I don't think the UK has either. So they're considered to be AAA rated, 5-star securities because they will never be defaulted on. And pension funds use these to provide the guarantees that they have to meet for people's pensions. So it's quite an important area. It's probably bigger than the stock market, the bond market. So that's what's happening there. The US is unlikely to default on any bond payments, but they're effectively printing money to pay the interest on the money that they already owe. So if you or I had a credit card and we were just going out to borrow money from other credit cards and more loans to pay the interest on the loans that we already have, we'd eventually run out of money, and we'd eventually go bankrupt, or they would stop giving us any more money. The lenders would say, no, you already owe this and this and this, we can't give you any more money. And then that's when the house of cards starts to fall in. Whether this will happen to governments or not, it might happen to smaller governments. It has happened in the past, but whether it will happen to larger governments is another story. But there is also a possibility that Rishi Sunak is going to extend the loan support for businesses. This is what he gave to businesses that were struggling during lockdowns, and I think they spent about 80 billion on that, and this is due to end in December, and they're planning, there's rumours that this may be extended beyond December. Now, why is this? Well, maybe they feel that the economy is not recovering as fast as it should, as they thought it would, and things might be slowing down again, and some businesses have never really come out of it. They've only just started opening up. I was in town recently, and yeah, businesses are busy now. It was a busy evening, and people are on the trains and out partying and getting drunk and all that sort of stuff. But those businesses have had months and months of non-trading. So I already told you this week that one of the largest retail landlords, Hammerson, are planning now to start getting tough on landlords because they've dropped 50 billion basically on reduced rents, agreements, write-offs and help and support for their tenants. But I think now they're saying enough is enough. So is this extension of loan scheme because they feel that the economy is not growing very fast or inflation is back, or is it because they're planning another lockdown? Because Sajid Javid has already hinted this week that unless we take our third jab, unless you behave yourself, unless you wear a mask, unless you conform to what the Politburo says, then we will have to take measures to lock you up this Christmas. I mean, he didn't quite say it like that, of course, but that's what they're threatening and implying, that unless you toe the line, we are going to lock you up. And I think surveys are suggesting, and there was a TV debate on this on GB News with Nigel Farage, and people said, no, we're not going to put up with another lockdown. A lot of my friends who are law-abiding citizens said, we are not going to put up with for the government, that people have just had enough of it and businesses have had enough of it. So, as I said, this will be the second winter budget, and he's already sort of laid out his spending review. But here are 6 possible things very quickly to watch out for in the budget that could affect your pocket, really. A possibility of VAT on energy bills, and this is a tax on your energy bill. You can't not have an energy bill, but this is a tax. This is going to push up inflation. I'm not sure they take into account tax. They certainly don't in America. But this will push up people's cost of living, if you like. The cost of living will go up if they increase tax on your energy bills, which are already rising. They've already gone up due to the rising cost of natural gas and and the fuel prices. But he could be considering a cut on the value-added tax in order to help to cushion the blow of these rising costs. But that's going to cost money, so where is that going to come from? This has to either come from further borrowing, which he doesn't want to do, or more tax. Alcohol tax is another favourite of the government. When all else fails, let's just stick a bit of tax on the price of a bottle of wine or beer or whatever. And drinks taxes and levies have been in place since the 1600s. You remember those films of the pirates smuggling rum and brandy into the little coves in Cornwall, to avoid taxes. I think the punishment was death if you did that. But they raised 12 billion, and people like a drink in this country, and a tax, a couple of pence here and there on that sort of thing is an easy tax. Nobody really complains about it, and people just have to put up with it. Capital gains tax is a tax that is paid basically on when you buy and sell stuff like shares and property, and you make a profit on that, or you buy a business and you make a profit, you pay what's called capital gains tax. It's a profit on your gain for your hard work. So you take the risk with all your money. You risk bankruptcy, you risk a business failing. But then if you suddenly manage to come through all the red tape that the government put out for you, pay all their taxes, your corporation taxes, your income taxes, your tax on employees. If you pay all that and then you sell that business or you sell that property, the government then wants to tax you on that. They say, right, you've made a gain here, we want to tax you on it. I know it's outrageous, but this is what happens. This is what happens. And I think these taxes also apply to cryptocurrency transactions, because they're not considered to be a currency in terms of the way they're taxed. And I don't think they're a currency anyway. But these are the rumours that they could start tinkering with it, because at the moment, a capital gains tax is a bit less than income tax in this country. So they could mean scrapping the current rates of 10 and 20%. It's a tiered rate. Or in property it's 18 and 28%, and instead making everyone pay income tax on their capital gains tax. I guess they feel that some people are getting away with paying a little bit less by manipulating their taxes to pay more capital gains rather than income tax. But for a lot of people, it's going to affect them. People retiring, maybe selling their property, people selling shares, and so this is due. They've pointed out a report from the Tax Simplification Office that they recommend that CGT, capital gains tax, should be increased to bring them into line with income tax. I think any tax is part of it is obviously necessary, but the way that the government throw the money around, I think it's very unfair, and it's a disincentive to businesses to increase capital gains tax. So that you're saying, where's the incentive to start a business when you're going to be taxed left, right, and centre? You're going to have to jump through all these bureaucratic hoops and red tape, and then you're taxed on the profit if you manage to sell that business or property for a profit. They've already hit landlords in previous budgets on reduced tax benefits for property owners. So where is the incentive? And the government hasn't built enough properties to house people, so they need landlords. But on the other hand, they say it wouldn't raise a significant extra amount of tax, but I'm sure they need every penny they can get. Now, shares can be sold quickly, so if you want to avoid higher rates of capital gains, you can ring up your broker and go online and sell your shares and crystallise the gain in that year, and then buy the shares back the next day if taxes go up. But you can't really do that with property. Property can take weeks, months to sell. So if you've got a property and you're thinking about flogging it straight away, I mean, the budget is like next week or so. I don't think you're going to make it somehow. It's this Wednesday. So, there's no way unless you can somehow complete a transaction in cash to avoid capital gains. And we don't even know if it's really going up. These are only possible things that might happen. There are also student loans as the other area. There are also reports that graduates may be asked to start paying back student loans earlier, and that could save the Treasury $2 billion a year. I mean, student loans is another one I don't quite understand. You give money to students on a loan, but how many of them really pay it back? They have to, earn, £27,000 a year, just under 27,295 before they start paying the loans back. Then they repay the same 9% until the loan is fully repaid 30 years after graduation. But if the threshold were reduced to 25,000, it would obviously hit more people quicker. And 25,000 is about the national average income. So it would cost anyone earning more than that, would have to start paying back this loan. And if it was slashed to 20,000, it could cost people another £650 a year. So that could happen. Ministers are even talking about as low as 23,000. I guess students wouldn't be happy about this, but with all this money they've spent in the last few years, 300 billion on lockdowns during the pandemic, somehow this money's got to be clawed back from all of us somehow. And the other thing with student loans is that, if you give student loans to European students and they go back home, how has that been repaid to the UK? How is that going to be taken back? People have been able to come here, study on a loan effectively for free because they're given this loan. But if they don't stay in this country, then what? What happens then? What if they emigrate to Australia or just go off somewhere? That could include British as well as people of European origin who go back home. Then what? I don't know. I haven't seen all the figures, but it seems like a bit of a nonsense to me. Minimum wage rise. The government announced that the national living wage, what the government called the minimum wage, would increase for workers over 23. Since then, the government has become under pressure to help employees further, especially as younger workers have been some of the worst hit during the domestic downturn. One solution has been reported that the Chancellor could be looking to increase the national living wage by 5.7% to £9.42 an hour from its current rate of £8.91. So this would bring it close to the Living Wage Foundation's current recommendation of £9.50 an hour. So how is that going to help? Well, it will help people on minimum wage, but businesses will face a 5.7% increase in wages. Now, there's been reports this week of the care industry struggling to find staff and the care providers struggling to pay people enough to retain staff who can then go off to work in Subway, as one example, and earn, I think it was £9.50, £10 an hour, compared to what he could pay in a rural nursing home, pay a carer, which was the minimum wage, £8.91. Now you might say, why don't the care providers just pay them more? Well, their rates are that they charge are governed by the local authority, which is ultimately governed by the government and how much money they give the local authority to pay for the care. So these care providers have long been squeezed on margins. So there's not that much money to start splashing out and paying carers, £10 or £11 an hour because they're so valued. Well, if they were that valued, the tax rates would have to go up to pay for people in care. Now, if you're watching this in Asia, you might say, well, what's the problem? We look after our elderly there. Well, unfortunately, we don't here. So, millions of people go into care, whether this be in care homes or it could be domiciliary care provided by the local authority again. This is where people go to your home and provide, say, an hour care, and then they come back in the evening and so on. So we've got another big time bomb here, the amount of people in care, and the government have vowed to sort out this social care system. At the moment, if you've got a house or assets and you go into care, you either pay for that yourself or they take away your assets. So it's the government looking how they're going to sort this out. There's a big study into how they're going to sort this problem out, because it clearly is not really working. And because of the immigration restrictions now set up on European workers, there is a lack of workers coming in from places like Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, who used to provide workers for the care industry. And one care provider said, well, if I bring in migrant workers, this is from Europe or Philippines or India, I've got to pay them £10 something, £10.91 I think. So that's unrealistic, because that's £2 an hour more than he can afford to pay, that he's paying British-based workers. So something's got to give here. At the moment, a lot of people are leaving the care industry because they've just had enough of it. It's too stressful. Don't forget, the government put a load of people in there under Matt Hancock's regime. He put a load of people from hospital who were sick with COVID and stuck them straight into care homes. So 20,000 people died. Well, that also affected the care workers as well. So they've had so much stress. They've got so much work to do, backbreaking work, hard work, and yet they get paid the minimum wage. Unfortunately, that is what the market wants to pay. So if you want the market, if you can be more used to the marketplace and say, well, I'm going to go do something else that will pay me more, then you have to leave the care industry, and that's what people are doing in their droves. They're also losing staff who are unwilling to be forced to take the thing in their arm, and because that law is coming in on the 10th of November. So anyone who hasn't had the thing in their arm has been told their contracts is terminated, and they will have to leave the industry, and they'll be lost then forever. So a lot of people say, no, it's my choice. I have a choice. It's my body. I've got, what happened to human rights? So that's what's happening there, and so that's a big problem for the care industry. And we got out of Europe because of uncontrolled immigration from Europe, but now we're seeing some problems. Obviously, we're seeing staff shortages in the transport sector, obviously the care sector, which has always had staff shortages. I was recruiting care workers from the Philippines in 2000, and we had big shortages then. But since then, successive governments have made it more and more difficult to bring in migrant workers from outside Europe, and now that law then applies under the points-based system for European workers. So you're not going to be able to really go and recruit care workers from Poland and these countries. Having said that, there should be a lot of people here, because 5 million people have applied for some sort of residential status in the UK in the last few years. So where are all those workers? Then the last thing here, number six, is pension higher rate allowance. This is one that has often been discussed in the past. This is the tax relief on pensions that is claimed back by people paying higher rates of tax, 40-45%. At the moment, if you put money into a pension scheme, as you should be encouraged to do, they give you back the tax that you would have paid on that income, which is fair enough. The government have tweaked and mucked around with this for 20 or 30 years to such an extent that people just don't understand the pension regime, or they don't trust it. They don't trust the returns that the fund managers are giving them. So what have they been doing? Going out and buying buy-to-let properties. 2 million people have bought buy-to-let properties. Some of these landlords, most of them only own one or two properties. So the government have seen that and said, oh, we better tax them as well. We're losing tax over here. We better get this tax back somehow. So you can't really win whatever you try and do. The answer is you've really got to learn about finance. You've got to be financially educated, and that's the key to building wealth. Keeping wealth is to never stop learning, so that you make changes. You become adaptable to whatever changes they're throwing at you. There's always a way around these things, and you've got to be educated to know this. Now, when I say educated, I don't mean going back and getting a degree in economics. I just mean watch my channel, for instance. Watch my YouTube channel. Watch my posts, and and these things that give you free information. And also take my courses. Look at my free on-demand training, which you can find a link to at the bottom here. Learn about how to master your money the smart way, and then keep yourself abreast of all that's going on. I go through lots of tips in my course, but one of the things you can do is just pick up the paper at the weekend. And I don't mean the local comic like The Sun or something, but just pick up one of these. They're called broadsheets, right? Broadsheet papers, like the Telegraph. The Times is no longer a broadsheet, but it was a broadsheet. It's considered to be like the Times, the Telegraph at the weekend, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times. If you just go into your library every day and scan it, you'll get a really good idea. Just scan the headlines of what's going on in the financial world by keeping yourself abreast. But the main thing is to watch me. I'll try to cut this information down and dissect it into what really matters to you, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or on my free courses, and you can check out my free course, my on-demand training below. So thanks for listening, and keep learning, never stop learning. That's my tip for the day.